After spending so much time on the Middle East, let's switch gears and talk about a purely historical topic. Many of you probably know about the major military parades scheduled for September 3rd. Peacetime parades can boost national pride, but a wartime parade can change a nation's destiny. Looking back through history, the most famous military parade of all is undoubtedly the one the Soviet Union held in Red Square on November 7th, 1941. This event fundamentally changed the Soviet Union's morale and provided a critical boost on the path to ultimate victory. Today, we'll explore how the Red Square Parade completely altered the Soviet Union's fate in World War II. For the Soviet Union, the situation in October 1941 can only be described as desperate. Since the beginning of the German invasion, the Red Army, caught off guard, had suffered unimaginable losses. In just over 4 months, total Soviet casualties exceeded 5 million, with over 3 million taken prisoner. They had lost over 20,000 tanks, more than 17,000 aircraft, and tens of thousands of artillery pieces. Nearly all the army groups deployed along the western border before the war had been annihilated or existed in name only. While there were still about 2.7 million troops along the front line, a number seemingly close to the 2.9 million stationed there before the war, these soldiers were the battered remnants of repeated mobilizations. Not only was their composition completely different, but their training and equipment levels were far inferior to what they had at the start of the conflict. The Red Army's experience and equipment had hit rock bottom. It was a hollowed-out force that had been repeatedly drained and hastily refilled. This grim reality left the Soviet high command, including Stalin himself, with little confidence in the war's prospects. It also led to widespread chaos in the capital of Moscow even before the Germans arrived. Faced with this almost hopeless situation, the State Defense Committee ordered the emergency evacuation of most government agencies and foreign embassies to the temporary eastern capital of Kuyabyshev on October 15, 1941. However, this move sent a threatening signal that Moscow might fall. When Moscow's citizens learned of the evacuation, they quickly descended into chaos and panic. Factories shut down, rumors ran rampant, and signs of looting and anarchy began to appear in the city. If the situation didn't improve, the Soviet Union was at risk of collapsing from within before the Germans even captured the city. In response, Stalin and the High Command made the fateful decision to halt the evacuation and remain in Moscow. While this choice temporarily curbed the public's panic, it didn't fundamentally change the city's precarious position. By mid to late October, German advance units were a few dozen kilometers from the city center. Moscow was about to face an all-out German assault with little preparation. But at this moment, an unexpected event changed the course of history and bought the Soviet Union precious time. In 1941, rainfall in the Soviet Union was heavier than usual. In late October, continuous autumn rains turned the land into an impassable sea of mud. These terrible road conditions, known as the Rasputitsa, slowed the advance of Germany's mechanized forces and gave the Soviets 2 to 3 critical weeks. With time to think, Stalin began to assess whether Moscow could be saved. He appointed Georgy Zhukov as the overall commander of the city's defense. After Soviet intelligence confirmed that Japan had no intention of invading from the north, Stalin, following Zhukov's advice, began transferring the Soviet Union's last elite divisions from the Far East and Siberia. Starting in mid-October, wave after wave of these troops arrived in Moscow via the Trans-Siberian Railway. In total, about 40 divisions were redeployed, including legendary units like the 316th Rifle Division, the 93rd Rifle Division, and the 58th Tank Division. They were well-trained, fully manned, and accustomed to fighting in frigid conditions. But the question for Stalin was how to translate the arrival of these elite forces into a nationwide boost in confidence. To declare the Soviet Union's resolve to the entire population, Stalin made a daring decision in late October. Before sending these troops to the front, he would use the anniversary of the October Revolution to hold a grand military parade in Moscow. The 1941 Red Square Parade was a carefully calculated, high-risk, high-reward political and military operation. The idea originated in a secret meeting of the Central Committee in late October, where the head of the Moscow City Committee proposed holding the traditional anniversary parade to lift morale. This was an extremely bold proposal. The Germans were at the gates of the city. A parade would not only consume significant manpower, but would also expose the Soviet Union's last reserves packed together in Red Square to German long-range artillery and airstrikes. However, the potential morale boost was undeniable. Stalin didn't make an immediate decision. Instead, he consulted Zhukov with one core question: could the Red Army secure the area around Moscow to ensure the parade's safety? Zhukov's answer was affirmative. He assured Stalin that the Germans were not prepared to launch a breakthrough attack in the coming days, and that the current Soviet defenses could hold. This information removed Stalin's biggest doubt. He and the rest of the leadership knew that the defeatist sentiment and panic in Moscow required a powerful antidote. The decision to hold the parade was made quickly. To prevent a German air raid, the parade was kept under the strictest secrecy. The commanders of the participating units were only given their orders on the evening of November 6th, the day before. The soldiers themselves weren't told they were heading to Red Square to be reviewed by Stalin until the early morning of the parade itself. Despite the short preparation time, the execution was nearly flawless. Approximately 28,500 soldiers participated. The vast majority of these units were already on their way to the front lines. Therefore, the parade didn't weaken Moscow's defenses. Instead, it served as a powerful spiritual send-off before battle. The display of T-34 tanks, heavy artillery, and Katyusha rocket launchers also sent a clear message to the world that Soviet industry had not been completely destroyed. Most importantly, Stalin's personal appearance and speech at the parade crushed the rumors that Moscow was about to fall and that he had fled. Inspired by his words, the mindset of Moscow's citizens underwent a fundamental transformation. Despair and fear were replaced by determination and hope. War preparations, like digging trenches, setting up barricades, and producing munitions, resumed with high efficiency. When news of the parade reached the German lines, it had an unexpected psychological effect. Before the Battle of Moscow, it wasn't just the Red Army that was on the verge of collapse. The Germans were in bad shape too. Their supply lines were stretched over 1,000 kilometers from the Polish border. Hitler, obsessed with a swift victory, had made no real preparations for a winter war. And a huge number of German soldiers were being taken out of action by frostbite. The biggest motivation keeping them going was the hope that capturing Moscow would end the war. The news of the grand parade in Red Square was a precise and devastating psychological blow. It shattered the German propaganda that constantly repeated, "The enemy is finished." It also confirmed the terrifying stereotype among German soldiers of the Soviet Union's endless resources of manpower. On a deeper, strategic level, when German commanders learned that the troops in the parade were elite units from Siberia and the Far East, it confirmed a deeply discouraging prediction. Japan was not going to join the war against the Soviet Union. Germany would have to face them alone. This shift in morale, sparked by the parade, helped level the playing field, allowing the Soviets to compensate for their tactical disadvantages with sheer fighting spirit. It greatly increased their chances of winning the Battle of Moscow. But the benefits of the parade extended far beyond that single battle. In the long run, it opened the path to final victory. At the time, the Soviet Union was in the middle of a massive industrial relocation, and its supply lines couldn't keep up with the front's immense needs. The initial devastating losses also made the United States hesitant to provide significant aid. But when news of the Red Square Parade reached Washington, this display of almost insane determination shattered the American image of a panicked, collapsing Soviet Union. They began to see the USSR as a viable and powerful potential ally. American diplomats and journalists reported back home, emphasizing that the Soviets had no intention of surrendering and were prepared to fight to the death. After the outcome of the Battle of Moscow became clear, the quantity, quality, and speed of American Lend-Lease aid to the Soviet Union saw a massive increase. These supplies would ultimately provide the rock-solid foundation for the Soviet victory over Germany. And the Red Square Parade, the starting point for it all, remains a shining moment, a legacy of that regime that endures even today, long after the Soviet Union has ceased to exist.